and welcome to this Euronews debate. We are in the heart of the European democracy here at the European Parliament in such a crucial day. Today is the Super Tuesday, so all the vice president candidates are currently being grilled by MEPs. There are two ongoing. And today, from this House of Democracy, we're going to talk about an important aspect of the health policy agenda, which is, of course, rare diseases, and in particular, the rare disease Moonshot, that was an initiative launched in December 2022 as a commitment by 7 organizations to break down the barriers and finding new treatments for the world's rarest and most severe conditions, which currently have no therapeutic options. I'm Gerardo Fortuna. I'm a journalist at Euronews. And with me, together with me, we have a very distinguished guest. I'm going to introduce them to you, starting with, of course, Vlad Voculescu, who's an MEP for the Sun Committee, Renew Europe, so Liberal.
Yes.
And also the coordinator for the Liberals.
I'm the coordinator of my political group.
Thanks for being with us, Vlad. Then we also have Daria Yurkovska, who's Assistant Director at the INSERM, the French National Institute of Health and Medical Research. Thanks, Daria, for being with us. And then we have Magda Chlebus, Executive Director for Scientific and Regulatory Affairs at EFPIA, which is the Association of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers in Europe. And then we have Graham Slater, who's in the board of directors of Euroordis, which is the representing the voice of patient of rare diseases. Thanks for being with us. So we have a particular concept today. Of course, we're going to talk about this initiative. We're going to talk about how rare disease is going to be dealt with during the next legislative actually, the current legislative mandate is just started. But the main idea is to talk straight and trying to demystify some buzzwords, because I mean, we are in the bubble, we are in the bubble. We tend to lose the meaning of certain words by repeating them. And sometimes this creates also a bit of a distance with citizenship. So the idea is to take some buzzwords, of course, also discussing about this topic, but trying to understand what they mean in practice. So not to use jargon, because sometimes we tend to, I mean, I'm among those, we tend to speak in code. And I'm going to start with introducing the topic, and particularly the Moonshot initiative, what it is also, because, I mean, we're going to have the second anniversary in a bunch of days. So I'm going to start with Magda, asking her what is the initiative and what's your, your assessment of how it is going.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I think that you spoke about those unmet medical needs where there is not much research, the white spots, and I'd like really to talk about that. So when the pharma strategy was discussed by the European Commission and this House, there was an ask to direct investments into these unmet medical needs. At that point, with FPA, we looked at what are the challenges and what causes the white spots, and there were 3. Science and translational research capability. If you don't have those, there is no development. Removing regulatory and access barriers, that was the second one, and the third one was a proper incentives ecosystem. While the 2 latter were taken care of by the political debate, in science, we wanted to see how we can actually accelerate that. What are the gaps? And there were indeed scientific challenges. So the first one were gaps in science, no science. Most of these unresearched diseases have less than 5 publications. You can't do much based on lack of science or scientific gaps. Then research was done in sequence. So again, problems. We are very slow. If we continue like that, 100 years, and we won't have any results, siloed, public separate, private separate, and not sustainable. Initial kick from the European Union was not followed through by a big program. So we thought, okay, how can we change the situation? And can we, by bringing together everybody from the translational research ecosystem and hoping for a moonshot vision that we can really do something dramatically different, accelerated. Can we use public-private collaboration to do that? And that was the underlying the reason for creating the rare disease moonshot. For 2 years, we've had companies, we had European infrastructures, we had industry organizations and non-profit organizations, and we've done research recommendations, 2 projects starting soon, 9 more going on. And I think that actually we not only talked, we also walked the talk. So a lot has been achieved and a lot to be proud of.
Thanks, Marta. You also mentioned some of the buzzwords that we are going to...
I'm sorry.
No, absolutely, absolutely. This is the scope of this debate as well. Graham, what's your take on this, these first 2 years of the initiative?
It's been, I think, an exciting 2 years. I think it's important to say from the patient perspective that alliances of this type are so important because we need multiple stakeholders to make progress in this very important area. And the work that's has been done, particularly around the 3 areas, the clinical studies, the diagnostics, the translational sides, are all very, very important and require increased focus.
Thanks. And Vlad, of course, you're an MEP recently elected. You were a minister. You had.
I was a minister.
Yeah,
Before that, I was a patient advocate.
Exactly, exactly. And you also have this dual role because you were you're still a patient advocate, I guess. So I just want to ask you, as to bring this perspective as a policymaker, but also as a patient advocate about rare disease, considering that we're starting a new legislation, and it was quite high in the agenda in the past Monday.
Well, my past, as you said, is one of a patient advocate, and over the last 15 years, I've been advocating for new treatments and available treatment and access to treatments for kids with cancer, primarily, and all children cancer. All cancers are actually rare diseases. It's a very small population. Yeah. And in terms of unmet medical needs, you can discuss everything from medicines to treatments as such to surgeries that are not available in many countries in Europe, and not only in the poorer countries and not only in the smaller countries, but also you can have a rare disease in a country like Germany. But you'd have to if you're a 17-year-old young lady, let's go. If you need a medicine that has not been developed primarily it has been developed primarily for your type of cancer, but not for your age group, this is an unmet medical need. And there needs to be a push from policymakers, from patients, and from everyone around the table, for those medicines to be developed not only for a specific pathology that is probably most profitable, but also for rarer types of tumors, if we're talking about cancer, and also for age groups that are not as numerous as the others. This is something that we need to aim for, and then we also need to aim for cooperation between countries and primarily actually between doctors and between institutions, so that, again, coming back to the example that I mentioned earlier, if you're a 17-year-old young lady in Germany that can only be treated somewhere in France, that you can get that treatment ideally in Germany, but if it's not available, that you can travel in France. And I guess we're going to be able to talk later on.
And this is something where the EU can actually have a role, and also you as a EU policymaker. I move to Daria. Thanks for introducing the topic. I'm going to Daria, who's representing also the research, but also, in a sense, also innovation. What's your experience with this initiative when it comes to accelerating research?
Yeah. Well, I think that first of all, it is the first time it's been a long time that we were discussing about the need of public-private collaborations. This is something that we're saying this is crucial, we need to sit together. There are a lot of great initiatives, the Euronews roundtable of companies, so there are a lot of places where, let's say, there is a possibility of having let's say, the voice or the discussion. But for me, the Rare Diseases Moonshot was really like a starter, an accelerator for the public-private collaborations and the place where we can sit together, academia, patients, and industry next to each other, discuss, and at the end agree on a joint voice to accelerate research on rare diseases. So this is really the first time where the academia and industry are sitting, let's say, sitting together and discussing jointly and having the joint goal, which is to target rare diseases more specifically the white spots.
So we have already the first concept to explain in plain terms, which is public-private partnership. I'm going to ask to Magda to help us in presenting a bit this concept. It's intuitive, but still, what we mean by public and private partnership.
Public-private partnerships are often seen like putting public sources and private sources of funding together and letting a third party to do the work. I think we are not talking about this type of partnerships. We are talking about the partnerships that Daria was talking about, where you bring researchers from private sector, public sector, patients, healthcare systems, regulators, sitting around the table, defining what the problem is, and then working towards achieving the solution, because none of us has it all. We don't have all the science, we don't have all the know-how, infrastructure. Each of us has an element of that, and by putting these things together, we can accelerate the progress. This is being done in various pockets of activities, but I think we try to make it more systemic and systematic, to demystify public-private partnerships, remove the perceptions of conflicts of interest. Of course, there are some, they need to be managed, but it doesn't mean that this is a barrier for collaboration. So I hope I could explain in plain English.
Yeah, no, actually, yes. And I'm turning this into a question to what you were saying before as breaking silos. That, when it comes to research and innovation in this field, this can't be done in silos. I'm turning into a question to Graham. What we mean with, working in silos?
Working in silos is working in very specific sort of areas and very specific topics. I always draw upon my own personal professional background, which is not in healthcare, where we learnt in the industries I was involved in that the silo mentality did not lead to optimal solutions. You need to bring together the various disciplines that are necessary for whatever it is you're looking at, a program of work. And believe me, this is complex that we're talking about here, but in actual fact, it's no more complex than some of the major initiatives which I've seen in, for instance, the aerospace industry. So what I would say is there's lots of evidence to suggest from the world of business that silo mentality will not work. And I think it's very, very important that we bring together, that, as has already been expressed, that we bring as many of the disciplines and the groups of people, all of these stakeholders together, and ensure actually right from the very beginning of the process that as many of the stakeholders as possible are involved. Because again, experience suggests that if you don't bring the stakeholders in at the beginning, if you then need them later on in the process, you may get resistance, in fact, and you certainly won't get optimal solutions, or you might get rework.
Considering that healthcare is not your background, you clearly haven't worked in silos in your life. So basically, you're the actual proof that it's good to even enlarge your vision. Also, politicians have to enlarge your vision. For sure, you had lots of examples in your as minister, but also in these few months as policymaker about this the added value of this collaborative environment. So I just want to ask you, why do you think it is more effective to work, of course, also in this sector in particular, develop therapies for rare diseases. Why do you think that there's an added value in collaborating?
Well, for me, I'm a politician. I can be blunt, or I should be blunt sometimes. So it doesn't make any sense that one group of doctors, one group of scientists in a certain institute, at a certain institution, be it private or public, that they do something and that there's no continuation of that. And sometimes we also have distinct interests, sometimes conflicting interests. But when those conflicting interests also, when they affect in a dramatic way the continuation of science bringing something good to the people, that's something that needs to be handled also on a political level. When I say at a political level, policy and politics is not just being done here in the European Parliament. There's always politics inside the pharma company. There's where not even there it also happens that in the same company, in the same multinational company, you don't have one group working with another towards a common goal, even if that's beneficial for the whole company. But also at universities, among institutions, among research institutions in the same country and beyond borders. And the European Union offers us tremendous opportunities, not only on a political level in the European Parliament, but we have basically in Brussels also representatives of the industry, like FPA, we have representatives of research institutions. We have a plethora of joint actions of European reference networks, which are European-funded programs that should bring together various actors that are involved at a certain level in the same pathology. That they work together with a very clear goal of providing patients with better treatments and also innovation in every field.
And we're going to touch on this point of European reference networks later on this debate, but Daria, I have to ask you another buzzword. We talk about ecosystems, which is a biological term. So what we mean when we say ecosystem?
Well, I would say that actually when we mean ecosystem and the way it is defined as a biological term, which means the harmony, the synergy between the different elements to make and optimize the things in the best way possible. I think that this is something that we can clearly transpose on what we are trying to do, what the RD Moonshot is about, and the public-private collaborations, because the idea is really to think about the ecosystem and those different, working like a team, and the different members that are part of the same team, where there are the moments where the teamwork is crucial to achieve your goals, and the others when we need to work separately to advance on different elements. We were talking about silos, and I was thinking it is amazing because there are so many actually elements that indeed require the connections. So for example, since many, many years, we have put a great funding mechanism from the public side that actually we just realized now when discussing with the others that we were not listening enough and that there is too much silencing and that there needs to be the integration of the voice of the other. Because as you mentioned, that we have different agendas, and this is normal, different businesses, different interests. But if we have a common goal, that means that we can really listen to each other and create those pathways between the different elements of the ecosystem. So I think that at least when we think about the rare diseases ecosystem, that means bringing those different elements and taking the best what we can out of them, but making them work in synergy, which is still requires some work.
this thing of the buzzwords is actually working, because I already have some follow-ups based on what you were saying before, and I actually want to ask to Magda if she can elaborate a bit more on this aspect of the conflict of interest. You were mentioning that this could be an issue. I also gonna ask the take of Graham on whether we should be concerned of collaboration happening in the field of rare diseases.
I personally very strongly believe that conflict of interest is often an excuse rather than a real barrier. And that what is important is that there is a disclosure of interest, there is transparency of who represents whom, and what is the goal of the collaboration for each party, no hidden agendas. I think that makes a transparent collaboration where conflicts or divergent interests might be managed. After all, we don't need to agree on everything, as long as Daria said, we have one clear objective and we all contribute to that objective. We can have completely conflicted interests on other aspects, but we can have a complete convergence of interest on achieving that particular goal. And I think we sometimes are throwing the baby with the bathwater because we are afraid and we are not doing that. And to be honest, I don't think that public-private collaborations with a few notable examples at the European Union's level are not really even incentivized and supported as good as they could be. We have joint undertakings. These are very ring-fenced places where public-private collaboration happens, like the Innovative Medicines or Innovative Health Initiative. But elsewhere, public-private collaboration is not required, even where it makes sense. And I think that with the research recommendations that the Rare Disease Moonshot delivered, there is a chance now for the research funders to take those recommendations and to say, for addressing these questions, we encourage you, applicants, to do public-private collaboration. I think that would already change the way of perceiving those conflict of interest. If the authorities say, we want you to collaborate, that would remove part of the sort of stigma, if I may.
Mm-hmm. And Graham, what do you think on this, on conflict of interest? And I also want to ask you, if you, because we're talking about cooperation among certain stakeholders, but if you fear that if there's a risk of excluding a range of other medical partners.
Thank you for the question. And just to pick up on what's already been said, keyword transparency. In any collaboration, there has to be a shared objective. But you have to recognize also that individual partners in that collaboration might have other goals, they might have other benefits. And as long as they're declared, as long as they're understood, there should not be an issue. I mean, the truth of the matter is that if this was a real sticking point, we would never have the collaborations that we see in many sectors, including healthcare, of course. We kind of know how to do this, yeah? And I kind of rather suspect that the conflict of interest issue is, I agree, maybe sometimes used as an excuse where one or more partners, potential partners, do not want to collaborate. They want effectively to go their own way. And back to what we said before, that's probably not a good idea because they probably want to do something in a silo. Yeah, so just linking that back to that point.
It's a vicious circle.
Yeah. With regards to your second point, yes. Is there a risk of exclusion? An area I think I do feel quite strongly about is that initiatives like Moonshot have the potential to rein in additional stakeholders over and above where we are now. And I did mention before that, potential stakeholders, even if not engaged at the beginning of a process, will potentially be obstructive if not engaged earlier on. At least that's my experience, not just in healthcare, or particularly not in healthcare, but in other areas of collaboration. And I think particularly here of other research areas, other technological areas which are relevant to healthcare. So I'm thinking here now of things which are slightly removed from the idea of the development, for instance, of new medicinal products, but other areas which I think will be very relevant and can be relevant even to this area of undiagnosed and currently untreated diseases. And I'm thinking here of things like robotics.
Yep.
I'm thinking about artificial intelligence. I'm thinking about tissue engineering, for instance, which is something I know a little bit about because my background is from a disease which required surgical intervention at birth.
Maybe gene therapies too.
Well, and gene therapies too, absolutely.
Considering that there's going to be also the Biotech Act.
But I think the other area, which, and I guess we might touch on this because you've said we'll talk about European reference networks. I think there's one other group which I see as being underrepresented. At the end of the day, in all of these developments, we have to ask ourselves the question, who are the real end users? The real end users are the patients and the clinicians. And I'd love to see a clinician around the table, representing...
Those who actually deliver also this. It's true, it's true. It's a good
but I do believe that increased engagement with clinicians in all of these processes is important because, as I say, they, at the end of the day, at the end of the journey that we're on here, are going to be involved. They are a stakeholder. So I'd like to see them engaged in the same way that I would like to see representatives of the other industries and technological areas that I've mentioned.
And actually, Vlad, you mentioned before medical doctors, and you were here last week during the hearing of Commissioner Designate for Health, Vaheli, and many also pointed out that this was something that was a bit neglected. There were some questions, but he didn't address that much this aspect, even considering the issue with healthcare workforce. So I don't know what's your take on medical doctors, clinicians, when it comes to rare disease, but also in general at the beginning of this mandate.
I think, I'll tell you what I think, and I'll also tell you what I discussed with the commissioner in private. The workforce shortage that we're already experiencing in pretty much in every European country, this is gonna hit us, and it's gonna hit us hard over the next, even during this mandate. By the end of this mandate, the average age of GPs or of top specialists in a certain rare disease, it's going to be significantly higher than it is now. Talking of the average age. Now, the average age for general practitioners, which is probably one of the most populous category of clinicians, is already beyond 50, 55 years in many European countries. So they are approaching sort of the ends, you can say the end of their careers, and there's no replacement for that. That's one thing. Second, we're all getting older. We're gonna need doctors. We're also gonna need nurses and care personnel. And if we look at hospitals in Paris, France, or Düsseldorf in Germany, or you name it, big institutions, reputable institutions like the temples of cancer care in some of these countries, you have capacities that are now not in use because of the lack of nurses. And this is something where we either we make this profession like the sexiest career path in Europe, and then you have a new wave of new entries, or you rely on computers and robots, but I'm not sure to which extent nurses can be replaced by robots or AI. Or we need to make sure that we take care of the problem that we're going to face, that we're already facing, and that is going to be tremendous over the years to come, by having an active migration policy. And this is something that I'm arguing in the Sant Committee. This is something that I'm arguing every time I have the occasion, because this is a problem that we're gonna need to address, and we should. The sooner we address it, the better will be for everyone. We can have the best treatments if we don't have the people to implement them, to do the most basic stuff that we're all going to need. That's gonna be a problem. And I can tell you that in private, in our private discussions that we had before the hearing with the Commissioner designate Varhely, he not only agrees, but he's somebody who's from his own country, from Hungary. He directly experienced both the shortage of nurses and doctors and the brain drain that has been happening over the last 2 decades, especially to all the Central and Eastern European countries. And we have 2 ladies from Poland here, and I'm from Romania. We can count tens of thousands of nurses and doctors that have migrated from Romania, Poland, Bulgaria, Hungary to Germany, France, Belgium, Netherlands, and so on. Some of the Belgian doctors are going north or to Switzerland and or to the UK, whereas spots here in Belgium are occupied by doctors from Eastern Europe.
This is the beauty of this Euronews debate. We are having an exclusive readout of the discussions between the Liberal coordinator and the Commissioner designate Varhely. But now again to Daria, I'm sorry, but I have to ask you other buzzwords. I mean, you represent also academia, research, so it's a bit of a moral duty. And in particular, I want to ask you 2 things. The first one is this paradigm shift that we say all the time. Paradigm shift, what we mean with paradigm shift when it comes to research on any, particularly on this one, finding treatment for diseases, but in general. And also the other one is this, something that Magda mentioned before, translational science, translational research, which is something that we know, but maybe needs to be a bit like, make it plainer, let's say.
Okay, the paradigm shift, it's not, it's true that it seems to be very mystic when you say that, but the reality, and I think it's not only for rare diseases, but it's beyond rare diseases, and I hope that with the RD Moonshot we are going also to show the blueprint of how we can make a paradigm shift in rare diseases field and how this can be transposed to any other area, is that it is really, I would say, it requires changes in this, let's say, set of mind in 3 different spaces. Scientific, and when you think scientific, for example, for rare diseases, that may mean, because we are talking here about more than 7,000 rare diseases, tomorrow it's impossible to have a drug that is targeting every single disease. It will not, I mean, we don't have time. So, for example, paradigm shifts from the scientific standpoint, it could be thinking about grouping rare diseases. It could be seeing, let's say, the approach to the rare disease research in a different way than the traditional one that we are envisaging today. The other one, and this is where also the translational part comes in, is the operational part. So operational paradigm shift. So how can we move from this, very sequenced approach where we have, I don't know, the basic research, preclinical, then the other steps and so on, when everybody is doing their thing in their silo, into something that is really connected. And when we understand that actually you need the inputs, it's a circle, and actually even, I don't know, loops or whatever if you want, because there is a need for the inputs at every stage. And the third one is regulatory. Because we know that today, when we think, and it happens still to me when I talk to my colleagues who are doing research, is that they are saying, yeah, I'm really passionate about what I'm doing, but I'm not necessarily thinking about what I mean, I don't want to know exactly what is going to bring you tomorrow. I do it because for the passion of research. But the reality, and especially in rare diseases where we have, let's say, little money, little things that we need to maximize as much as possible, the regulatory aspects and thinking from the regulatory standpoint is very important from the very start, because that means that when we start to build the research projects together with the needs of patients, we not only think about the need of patients, because the need of patients, it means also that they have the access at the end, for example, to the new drug. And that means that there is this whole regulatory pathway that needs to go through. And so that means also that you have to shift the paradigm of research by making it regulatory compliant. So this is, and the translation is really of how to come from the step of the idea into something that is really tangible and a tangible outcome. And this, again, requires the paradigm shift, because that means that actually you have to do research in a different way.
Okay, super clear.
I hope.
Congratulations. Magda, you want to add something on the paradigm shift, because it's also something that affects the industry, the pharmaceutical industry, and also have a follow-up on what we were saying before on European reference networks and how they interact with the industry, the pharmaceutical industry.
Sure. I think on paradigm shift, just building on what Daria said, is we all need to change our ways of working internally within our own organizations, and just to agree that things would be done slightly differently, because you are not in a collaboration, you are not just doing the same with other people around you, you do things with them, and that means you need also to adapt your ways of doing, and that's an organizational, institutional paradigm shift. And the other one is how we finance research and how we encourage that change from silo work to collaborative work. And that's something that needs to happen in Europe. So for me, paradigm shifts are everywhere. We all need to reconsider ourselves, to do a little bit of inwards, retrospect, and say, okay, what can I do different, so that even if I need to make a step towards the others, how do I do that in order to accelerate progress? I think that's really very important. And we have a momentum for that today, because politically we have a fantastic momentum with the new institutions, with new funding programs, with new partnerships like Cerdera that Daria is representing today, with the Innovative Health Initiative, where FPI is active. We have these pockets of activities, but we need to make it more systematically, and use the political momentum and the upcoming tools, the multi-annual financial frameworks, the framework program 10, all of that in order to facilitate that change. I think it's really today from us a call for, please, policymakers, help us to do more of that, because we know it's important, but we need tools to make it happen. We need some finances to make it happen, and some incentives to make it happen.
And a flash on the reference networks and the...
I think that the European reference networks are a very important player, set up originally to deliver health and not to do research. Now integrating, some of them are part also of research networks, so I think there is a little bit of a crossover. I think bringing European reference networks with their data, with their diagnostic capability, with access to so many patients, up to speed with standards, regulatory and operational excellence related to research, to, again, another paradigm shift that may need to happen, without neglecting health delivery, because this is the primary goal for which they've been set up, but also to enable them to do more of the research. And there are some pilots with the project Together for Rare that are trying on how to best integrate public and private and interact. I think that paradigm still needs to happen, and I think that Europe needs to continue supporting that change and that evolution.
And Graham, you made me think when you were talking before, which is a good thing, where you were talking about public-private partnership, and I don't know if you think that there's the feeling from the general public that there's some sort of transparency bias in the sense that maybe when it's happening with the public funder, there's full transparency in the process, and maybe when privates are involved, it might be a bit like less transparent. I don't know what you think about it.
Can I just add, before I answer that question, because there are very interesting comments that have been made about the paradigm shift.
Of course.
I just want to, because again, in the public's mind, I think paradigm shifts are associated with maybe technological breakthroughs.
Yeah.
You can talk about, I don't know, jet propulsion 70 years ago, even older than me. We could talk about smartphones and the use of the technologies which go with that, like the internet. What we're talking about here, I believe, aside from we're talking about two things. We're talking about process improvement.
Yep.
And we're talking about a complete shift in the way in which we think about the organization. Yes, it's a collaborative organization. And I think it's important to get that across because, as I say, I think when people hear the words paradigm shifts, they're looking for the next magical technological or biomedical solution. Yeah? So I think that was an important comment I just wanted to throw in. In answer to your real question to me, I think when it comes to healthcare, I think there is probably a feeling amongst the public that the way in which you collaborate between the private sector and the public sector in some way should or has to be different, that maybe there is a fear of it. I think it's misplaced. I really think it's misplaced. Because if you look back in time, although maybe not organized in this way, there have been many breakthroughs which have been as a result of those kinds of collaborations. And as I've mentioned before, we've got this kind of collaboration going on between public and private sectors in many other sectors. And let me give you one example. If we're concerned about, for instance, quality and safety in the world of healthcare, aren't we equally concerned about that in the world of transportation? And yet I don't actually hear people worrying too much about the whole concept of a private-public partnership when it comes to the development of transport infrastructure, for instance. So yeah, we do need to kind of demyth this, I think, and stress the benefits, stress the mitigation against the risks, and make the public more comfortable, and particularly make them comfortable about one issue which is different from what I've just mentioned, which is about their own personal data. Yeah. Obviously, that is an area which has to be considered, and protection of personal data outside of the direct clinical setting is something which should not be accessible other than in, shall we say, anonymized forms.
What do you think of the recent effort from the at EU level to regulate? From at EU level to regulate the aspect of personal data with for instance, the HDS.
Yes, I think
European data space. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely important, very, very important, and again, care very much needed in implementation.
In the implementation.
Yeah. The best laid plans of mice and men, as the saying goes.
Yeah.
And so therefore there's care, and it needs rigor, and it needs oversight.
This is a bit of a shared aspect, particularly in the healthcare world. It was a milestone, the European data space, but of course now it's time to implement it, and then it could be, problematic. Not problematic, but there could be something that can be lost in the translation. There's also a translation for the European data space.
Well, again, we have to stress the benefits.
Of course.
Without losing sight of the necessary regulation and control.
Of course. Vlad, other stuff that sometimes pop up during the discussion. We need to make Europe attractive. We need to make research here rather than in China, and then we just import the outcome in Europe. What's your take on this? Do you think that we should do research maybe also manufacturing in Europe when it comes to develop the treatments for rare diseases?
Well, definitely. That it's at least there are at least two pillars for my answer. That is definitely one is competitiveness. I think Europe has lost a lot of grounds on many business fields, and pharmaceuticals, generally, and medical devices, medical equipment, is still one of the sectors where Europe is competitive. We need to cherish that, and we need to encourage that competitiveness. Second, and for that, research and innovation in Europe is essential. And the second thing is sustainability and security of supply, which is also connected to what you were asking about manufacturing. But I think in the context, in the current global context, it's even more important than ever to have security of supply and so to have supply chains that are reliable. And unfortunately, there's a lot of politics involved, global politics. And there are threats out there that we need to take into consideration, and we need to take that into consideration with every policy that we're working on here in Brussels, but also in each and every country. So for these two reasons, yes, of course, this is necessary. Sometimes, on short term, this can cost more. And I would remind you that I think 80% of or over 80% of the APIs, the active pharmaceutical ingredients, are coming from China and India, mostly from China though. And this is one problem that has also to do with innovation.
And there's the opportunity with the Critical Medicines Act.
Well, that's an opportunity, but it will also cost money. It's not just this. It's not just fluffy words. It's not just policies. It's going to cost money, but this is an opportunity and a necessity.
And since we're talking about investment, that I have a question on the full course of investment, because sometimes there's an investment just on the outcome of the research, and then there's the aspect of deploying, upscaling. Actually, we were talking about who delivered this, so basically clinicians and so on. So I don't know what's your take on how the investment works at European level, if it should also consider the next step, so basically what comes after the research.
Yep. Well, I think that not only what comes after the research, but even the research part is still fragmented in terms of funding. Because it's true, and especially when you compare, indeed, for example, with the United States and the way things are being, let's say, encompassed there, we still have this big gap where we have a lot of public funding that invests in, let's say, preclinical research a little bit, but the moment when it comes to the risking, and this is related to the shifting from, let's say, from the academic research, maybe also to more innovation, so the smaller and medium enterprises and so on. This is where we still have a big gap, and I would say Europe is not a big, fan of risk, where we can see that more, for example, in United States. But the thing is also that when we're thinking about investing, we still can optimize the public investment. And again, the public-private collaborations and partnerships are there also to help, because we can optimize, because at the end, these are the money that are being, our taxes, citizens, and so on. We are responsible also towards them. So we want to make sure that there is a good investment also from the public side, and that we give ourselves the different means. And as Magda was mentioning, maybe this is where there is still a gap. Maybe this is where we need more support to be able to shift from the public funding, good public funding, to the, let's say, private industry investment, where there's the risking part is still being abandoned, and which is much more, let's say, goes much faster, for example, in United States, because you have venture capitals, because there is a different way of seeing, the end value of the investment.
Magda, I have a question on you, for you based on what Vlad was saying about manufacturing.
Yeah.
So I'd like to ask your take on this, but also I have another buzzword for you to explain, which is action plan. So basically, we need an action plan. Vaheli last week was like, we're going to do an action plan for cardiovascular diseases. So 5 years ago, we were saying just we're going to take initiative, but now it's an action plan. So why this matters, talking in terms of action plan, and of course, what's your take on the manufacturing aspect?
Okay, so maybe my response would be in three parts. What is the action plan? I think we need to defragment research. Because for the moment, there are many instruments, many calls, many places. Rare diseases have few patients, they are rare, so it happens globally. So we have not only fragmentation in Europe, but also global fragmentation. So at least for Europe, we need one roadmap towards which we can go and to which we can contribute through all tools that we have. And I think that the cancer mission had showed us a way. We are not saying that we need a mission that is heavy, bureaucratic, etc., but a mission-like approach. We were quite surprised that rare diseases have not appeared in the mission letters, for example. But, if we could have a plan that supports that, creating more science, translational capability, and supporting research in Europe, because it matters where research takes place. It matters for the patients, for the ecosystem, for healthcare systems, for industry. It matters for everybody. I think the plan is a common roadmap towards which everybody, or common goal towards which everybody contributes. And that can be done. And today I was talking about the momentum. The Draghi report shows a little bit of the way. We have multi-annual financial frameworks, Framework Program 10, Competitiveness Fund, the Biotech Act. We have the pharmaceutical legislation review. We have the modernization of the regulatory framework. And we have all the ongoing tools that can be optimized to support different types of collaborations. I think today we can already make a difference if somebody showed the way. And I think with the Rare Disease Moonshot, we were trying to do that.
It's a bit like you have your action plan, even if it's not mentioned like this. If you put together all this...
A common goal towards which different stakeholders can work and that are supported by different funding tools. I think that would be an ideal place to start while waiting for maybe something different and bigger in the future.
And if you want to reply to Vlad on manufacturing aspect, it's not every day that you have the possibility to address a lawmaker.
I think research and manufacturing in Europe are important, obviously. I represent a sector which does a lot of manufacturing of modern medicines here in Europe. So I agree that this is an important element. And I think that with advanced therapies in particular, we can, in Europe, create some hubs that would, in order to support rare diseases and these ultra-rare diseases, we need to support also these modern hubs that would support this manufacturing and that would support academia and small companies and the bigger companies to do this work more effectively in Europe. So I think some centers of excellence and support through regulation and maybe some funding for those who need it might be indeed a good place to start. Yeah.
We started also the last phase of this debate, so I'm going to ask with Magda, so I'm going to ask the last bunch of questions, and actually something for Graham. It's something that Magda mentioned, that it wasn't mentioned at all, the word rare disease in the mission letter of Vaheli. By the way, in the Draghi report, there were actually a lot of... Yeah, so it was a bit... Some were a bit flabbergasted by the fact that, in such an important report like the Draghi one, there was... a quite straight path toward the development of treatment and so on, and there was basically nothing in the political guidelines for this commission. How did you take it?
I could be charitable and say that it's a distinction between aspiration and what somebody believes is practically deliverable. Yeah. But you know, I think it's a case of focusing really on what was said. And the focus of the Draghi report was, from the perspective of what we are talking about today, the focus around the need for more research and innovation has to be strongly welcomed.
Yeah.
And I feel is very important move in the correct direction, the right direction to support the kinds of initiatives that we're talking about with Moonshot. Yeah, I really do prefer to it's not a case of, you know, hope over evidence or something, but I really do believe that we have the opportunities there. We still have the programs in place. We still have EU for Health. We still have the ERNs.
Exactly.
We still have ADERA. We still have Horizon. Yeah, we have all of these things which could contribute to it. And I think, although one might express some disappointment about the Commission letters, I really think that with the initiatives that we have at the moment, we should not be discouraged. We should be encouraged to move forward. We talk about an action plan. I think, to me, there are a number of things that could go on that action plan now, and will be in the minds of everyone who's involved in this kind of collaborative effort. That includes ensuring that we understand those patient partnership models, that we recognize, and this links into the translational medicine thing, that we recognize something which the Draghi report does say about Europe's general tendency not to take advantage of good technological developments, its failure to, I think the words are, industrialize and commercialize them. So we need to learn from that, and we need to apply those to this particular area with great vigor, and take advantage of this drive for more engagement between the public sector and the private sector. We do, I think, we mentioned briefly the ERNs, we do need, I think, to see the ERNs as part of this picture, very definitely. And I say that because that's an area where we already have massive clinician-patient engagement. Those networks are what we might call research ready. We've mentioned the fact that they can bring data to the party, with registries, with issues of that nature, which will be beneficial to the research and development agenda. But I would stress that we don't just want the research, we do want the development, we do want the transitional medicine, and we do want implementation. Here's a word we don't hear too much of. At the end of the day, it has to be implemented, it has to be there, yeah? And if I might, because I appreciate we're getting towards the end, I was struck by one very important thing in the Draghi report, and that was the comment that said, do this,
or it's going to be a slow agony.
It's going to be a slow agony. And if we don't do the things that we're talking about today, it's going to be ongoing agony for the patients that do not have
it's actually
solutions.
A very vivid image, also for the patient sector. But Vlad, I have a last question for you. You were addressing Vaheli last week. You had one opportunity and you raised the issue of cross-border healthcare, if I'm not wrong. So why it's important, but also why you think it's important for this topic?
for this particular topic, I think it's the most important because some treatments are only available in certain cities around Europe,
Yeah.
where it may happen that patients don't live. So we as Europeans, we need to make sure that treatments, and I mean the best treatment for each and every patient, is available for those patients, irrespective of whether that's available in the city or in the country they live in. So cross-border healthcare directive, an implementation report, because the implementation was also a problem. It's 13 years old, and the implementation is different from one country to the others. Statistics look dramatically different from one country to the other. We need to take a decent and responsible look at what the implementation looks like of the directive. We don't necessarily need to change the directive, but we need to look at the implementation, do some enforcement on from the European institutions towards member states, if that's necessary, and also look at ways and means to help patients. And then one question, the question that I directly raised in the hearing of Mr. Varhely, was also, are you going to support European reference networks, and are you going to support joint actions that for several pathologies, for more pathologies, and that go deeper into basically compensating for whatever shortcomings the implementation has had. That is, help patients in real life, help them get to the centers they need to.
We have some buzzwords for the next Euronews debate: enforcement, implementation. I'm afraid the time for this debate is over. So I thank my guests for their very interesting takes. And yeah, that's all for us today. And see you at the next debate.